Welcome, family. Good morning. Um, Steve, thank you. Um, let's see. Yeah. Um, my name is Ross Bronson. I'm a recovered alcoholic, and I have a God given sobriety date of 10, well, October 5th, 1989. And I am eternally grateful for the gift of sobriety. My experience before we get into the 12 step is I came into Alcoholics Anonymous and I didn't know what I didn't know. I didn't know about that mental obsession, that physical craving, the phenomenal craving, excuse me, and that spiritual malady on page 64 that I suffer from. And why? I mean, I lived around alcoholism all my life. My mother was essentially on a couch, fifth of scotch, 5 packs of cigarettes. So I mean, it was imprinted, but I never really understood the concept, or baffled by how she could not stop. Eventually, she found NA and AA. And I like this, and my father also, when he retired, uh, his alcoholism took off, and I like to say that their 12 step became my first step. So, with that in mind, um, it's always nice to be invited anywhere. Trust me, that it was probably years after I got sober that I started to realize that the parties I kept missing, you know, it would be because people were out. You're not inviting Ross, right? Please don't invite Ross because he won't leave, and he's loud, obnoxious, and you know, pretty self-centered. Um, my understanding with the 12 step, as it says here, excuse me, having had a spiritual awakening as the result of these steps, we try to carry this message and practice these principles in all our affairs. So when we get to page 89, the chapter working with others is entirely devoted to, guiding us through different examples of how to approach. It's the longest chapter in the book, so it's probably the most important. Bill spent a lot of time with it. But the first paragraph says, practical experience shows that, nothing will so ensure immunity from drinking as intensive work with others. It works when other activities fail. And this is our 12th suggestion. Carry this message to other alcoholics. You can help when no one else can. You can secure their confidence when others fail. Remember, they are very ill. And it continues to say some other nice things. Through the years, I had done different methods. I've always essentially had a book study as my home group. Excuse me, my wife is calling in the background. Best friend, excuse me. So I was my experience with Alcoholics Anonymous was that Joe and Charlie, who have both passed, they came out to Sacramento for 20 years. They started in 85 to 05, and then 2001 they everything was grounded, so they weren't able to make it. But I'm a slow study. I only saw them 17 times. I was blessed with the opportunity because I was living in Marin County, so it was only 90 miles, and eventually I moved to Sacramento. But I would, what's it, I would see them in September, and every year I went many times, and I just essentially decided that the place for me to be was in the big book. It tells us clear cut, precise directions, and it's a textbook. And I suffer, from my understanding, from a chronic, fatal, progressive disease. So why wouldn't I? It would be the question. Why wouldn't I seek the solution? Page 28, with the desperation of a drowning man. What seemed like a flimsy reed turned out to be the loving hand of God. So we also had Don before he traveled for the first decade or so, I think, with Terry, and then Terry got ill. But we had Don Brown out to San Rafael for 7 weeks in '94. I have it on cassette, so I don't know if I want to get converted. But phenomenal gentleman, and his way to convey and bring the book alive was just, he was on pilgrimage. I can't say it right, but he would travel to different areas: Sonoma County, Solano County, wherever God asked him to show up. So really, really phenomenal gentleman. So back to myself. I like to tell people I'm an at once guy. I'm an at once guy. The doctor's opinion describes that sense and ease and comfort that you and I get at once. That just that, and so I that's it says, on, well, I have a third edition, XXVI says men and women drink essentially because they like the effect produced by alcohol. The sensation is so elusive. While they admit it is injurious, they cannot, after a time, differentiate the true from the false. To them, our alcoholic life seems the only normal one. They are restless, irritable, discontented unless they can again experience that sense and ease and comfort, which comes at once by taking a few drinks which they see others taking with impunity. So my approach now has changed through the years. I used to do a thing where you read with people once a week, and takes too long. It's I don't find it effective. I would I don't do I will read with you after I've gotten you on steps. But what I essentially will do is go to pertinent areas of the book that I find relevant, and then move you. And the reason for that, like Joe and Charlie would talk about it also, is that we read chapter 5, at virtually every meeting. We open up with that. And what we do is we give the newcomer an impossible equation. And they use math as a kind of an analogy. But you put somebody on chapter 5, that's like taking somebody to maybe algebra or multiplications. And Joe and Charlie would explain it like, we want to go to the beginning of the book and let's say teach you some simple addition. And when you've learned addition, then maybe we would show you some subtraction and then move you forward. So when you bring people to the 5th chapter, you've taken them to a baffling place to be. So I am a strong advocate of approaching. Um, I don't believe that. I mean, I hear a lot of people say, "Oh, I'll get a sponsor, work the steps, this, that, and the other thing," and that's fine. But I think it's important that you and I makes the approach. It talks about it on page 25 that just one moment. I like to quote the book specifically, but it says, and there is a solution. It says, almost none of us like the self searching and the leveling of our pride, the confession of shortcoming, which the process requires for its successful consummation. But we saw that it really worked in others, and we had come to believe in the hopelessness and futility of life as we had been living it. When therefore we were approached by those in whom the problem had been solved, there was nothing left for us to do but to pick up the simple set of spiritual tools laid at our feet. We have found much of heaven and have been rocketed into a fourth dimension of existence, of which we had not even dreamed. Wow. So, I don't do phone lists at meetings. People say, put your name on a phone list. One of my home groups, we have 5 Nicks in the group. So how do you know which one? How do you know which Nick? You know, I'm a very strong advocate of full name. Dr. Bob wrote an article about the 11th tradition. He stated that we violate it when we go to radio, press, and film, but we also violate it when we are so anonymous, you and I can't find each other. You end up in the hospital, and all I know is your first initial. Won't get me to the hospital, won't get me to your bed, your room. Um, Even if you have an unusual first name, they're not, they want a full name. So, what I like, so here I am going to meetings. I don't completely recommend what I did. I started sometime in September of '88, and I lived on one side of the triangle, and that was fellowship. Went to a lot of retreats and all that fun stuff, picnics and everything. None of that treats my alcoholism. Doing service work, putting chairs away, and all that stuff is also keep you around. If you know if you do the commitment, that still won't treat my alcoholism. Listening to other people's stories, you know, um, I want to hear depth and weight. I'm already here, so I'm hoping that you can pull me with the vision. What I like though is it says on the excuse me, forward to the 3rd edition, I believe. Just one moment. It might be first. Just a second. No, it's first edition. My apologies. We of Alcoholics Anonymous are more than 100 men and women who have recovered from a seemingly hopeless state of mind and body. To show other alcoholics precisely how we have recovered is the main purpose of this book. So, precisely how we have recovered. But it took me probably a couple years before I saw that the word seemingly in front of hopeless state of mind and body. So it tells me it's a hopeless state of mind and body, twofold, but it tells me that I'm a seemingly hopeless person. So the hope here is that when you and I come in here, it only seems that it's hopeless. It only seems that we aren't going to be able to make it. Um, wow, amazing. Now, back in the early 30s, I believe there's a gentleman. He's out in Oakland. He's a doctor, but he says that he was saying that before there was a solution for alcoholism, you would go to Towns Hospital once, twice, maybe the third time, and they would clinically um, label you hopeless. So, because they had nothing they could do for you. They would dry you out, use moral psychology, things like that. But um, they didn't have a solution. They didn't have 12 steps. They didn't have this ability to convey this depth and weight. So when you hear hopeless, that actually in the late 20s or whatever, that was actually a clinical term. They would label you hopeless and send you home to die, delirium tremens and whatever, because there was no solution for us. So back to how how I make the approach is, generally speaking, what I will do is I will approach someone. I have cards with my phone number and everything on it. They don't necessarily call, but what I will ask them a few questions, like, oh, how they're doing and this and that. But then I would ask them. I said, well, how old are you? And they might say, well, I'm 32 or 34 or something. So then I would ask them. I said, wow, so you've been drinking since 12, 13? And they'll say, oh yeah. And I said, so you've been drinking for like what, 20 years? And somewhere like that. They might say 18 or what. Doesn't really matter. It's to engage a conversation and let them see what their situation is and say, wow, it's 20 years of drinking, huh? So Dr. Bob would ask you if you're done. Are you done for good and all? You know, and so that's what I try to approach them with that. Are you done? And if you're not, like Bob Olson said when he was approached that way from the people out in Colorado, he says, I don't know if I am, but I better be, or words to that effect. And Bob's got over 50 years now of sobriety, and but that's how he answered it because he wasn't sure. But he says, I better be. I hope I am. So I would ask them that and to see if they get you know um where they might be. Then what I will do is I will take them to page 44 and use some people say it's two questions. I say it's a two-part question, and it's from the first paragraph, and I will have them read to me, and then I will stop them. So I would say, and we go down about 4 lines, but he says, if when you honestly want to, you find you cannot quit entirely, and then I stop them, and I'll say, hey, have you ever been able to stay stopped? For any, for good and all, and they'll come up with different answers, but most of these people I'm approaching are new. They got 90 days or whatever, or 60 or 2 weeks or whatever. And they'll look at it and say, well, no, I haven't been able to. Boom. Or, and it's not and, it's or, if when drinking, you have little control over the amount you take. And I would ask them, when you go into a bar, can you absolutely guarantee you'll just go, let's say you call your spouse, say, I'm on my way home from work, I'm stopping at the bar, have a couple of drinks with my friends, and I should be home by 7. Can you absolutely guarantee that when you go in, you can control the amount you drink? And it's not a sometimes answer. And a lot of times they'll laugh. They're all, well, no. I mean, because they're thinking, well, why would I want to control my drinking? I mean, So, but do you end up, it's 10 o'clock at night, you have new friends now, your friends left 3 hours ago. So, but I have them read that. So if you honestly want to, you find you cannot quit entirely, or if when drinking you have little control over the amount you take, you were probably alcoholic. And I let them read that, and then I let them read the rest. And if that be the case, you may be suffering from an illness which only a spiritual experience will conquer. Promise. Boom. And so I let them read it themselves so they can qualify themselves, because they're probably like me. When I came into AA, I didn't know what I didn't know. I heard people at meetings talking about their circumstances. If you had my employer, if you had my spouse, if if this had happened to you, your parents had put you on the potty backwards, whatever. So I'm thinking, oh, so it's conditional. It's your conditions, it's your circumstances, excuse me. which is not true. It will your circumstances exasperate your condition? Absolutely. Will you drink to not remember things that maybe happened to you in your past? Absolutely. But that's not what makes us an alcoholic. So I let them qualify themselves, and then I would say to them, generally what I like to say to the people is, so if I could absolutely guarantee that you'll never have to drink again, would that be of any interest to you? And there's really only one answer, but I've heard many. Most of them will say, yeah, of course, that would be interesting. I've had people, oh, you can't guarantee that, it's only one day at a time, this, that, whatever. I just turn away and walk away from those people. Sorry, that's just what I do. It's like, if you give me any wiggle room, like, well, you can't guarantee that. Absolutely. Actually, we can. If you follow the clear-cut, precise directions outlined in this book, you'll never drink again. You'll never have to drink again. Just, wow. So, I would then move to, if I started working with the person, I would take them to page 30 and go through the first step. Just a second. And it says, most of us have been unwilling to admit we were real alcoholics. No person likes to think he is bodily and mentally different. Twofold nature of my disease, body, mind, different from his fellows. Therefore, it's not surprising that our drinking careers, who knew it was a career, have been characterized by countless vain attempts to prove we could drink like other people. The idea that somehow, someday, he will control and enjoy his drinking is a great obsession of every abnormal drinker. The persistence of this illusion is astonishing. Many pursue it to the gates of insanity or death. So there's your first step. We learned that we had to fully concede to our innermost selves that we were alcoholics. Fully concede to your innermost self. This is the first step in recovery. The delusion that we are like other people or presently maybe has to be smashed. So how do you and I fully concede to our innermost selves that we are, alcoholics? So I would digress. I actually would take them through the doctor's opinion first. I would read some of the forwards and take them to the doctor's opinion, but then I would go over to step one. So, and then what I mostly say to people is, I don't really care what you tell me. I mean, I do, but I don't. Because if you're like me, you'll tell me whatever you think I need to hear. Okay? Yeah. Oh, yeah, Ross, I fully concede. Can we do step two? No, I want you to go home and fully concede to your innermost self that you're done. It's like toast. You can't put it back in the toaster, you'll burn it. You put it in the microwave, it gets weird and soggy. You have to fully concede to your innermost self that you're an alcoholic. You can never drink again successfully. If we go back a little bit, it talks about, the idea that somehow and someday I will control and enjoy my drinking. For me to enjoy my drinking, do not tell me how much to drink. Don't do that. Don't do that. It will make your life so miserable. You will allow me to drink the way I need to drink. Okay. So for me to enjoy my drinking, there is no control. If I have to control my drinking, I am incredibly miserable. I'm looking to see if my watch stopped, the battery died. It's got to, I think there was one drink an hour or some baloney. So you have to fully concede. So the illusion, it talks about the illusion, the persistence of this illusion is astonishing because so the illusion's out there watching like a magician or somebody do 3-card money. But then it talks about the delusion. The delusion's within my mind. The delusion that I that I'm like other people has to be present. It has to be smashed. I'm not like normal people. What happens is, talks about it in the doctor's opinion, that we see other people drinking without impunity, and what happens is, I want to drink the way I drink, but I don't want to get into the arguments, the fights, and all the other stuff that I see normal people not getting into. But if you've ever watched normal people drink, I mean, that's alcohol abuse. They start saying weird stuff like, "Oh, I'm feeling it. I'm starting to feel it. Oh, I've had enough." So I let them fully concede to their innermost selves. And my understanding also of the first step I had, when I came into Alcoholics Anonymous, my life was unmanageable. Okay. I mean, I was almost, I don't know, I was 34. I moved back home with my parents. My dad's all, "How long are you going to be here?" I'm all, 6 months, 3 years later. So outward, I'm unemployed, unemployable pretty much. But so that's how I see, and I think a lot of us see powerless over alcohol, life's unmanageable. But really, my understanding of the second part of the first step is, when I get up after many days of drinking, because I'm using other non-conference approved stimulants so I can keep drinking. When I wake up, maybe after 4 or 5, 8 days, and I get up and I just am really dehydrated, hungover, and I have a headache, and it's 8 in the morning, and I'm just not going to drink today. Okay, just not going to drink today. So when I make the decision to not drink, can I not drink? Can I stay stopped? That's where the manageability, as I understand it, is. Can I manage a decision to stay stopped? Because somewhere around maybe 10 a.m., I don't know, maybe a friend will suggest it, or say, "Hey, maybe a little hair on the dog, get even, get that headache down." I'm not even arguing. I'm not even saying anything. Well, wait, I wasn't going to drink today. That's gone. All I'm thinking is, how do I get a little even? So if you can manage a decision to not drink, if you can manage a decision to stay stopped, you may not even need to be here, seriously. So that's my understanding. Can I manage a decision to stay stopped? And without God's help, no. Without the steps, no. On my own, my understanding is self can't overcome self. I don't have the ability to overcome the thinking mind that I have. That doesn't have the ability to overcome the thinking mind. So from 30, I would then go to page, after we already qualified, I'd go to page 45. Just one moment. And it says, just about 3 lines down on 45, we could wish to be moral, we could wish to be philosophically comforted. In fact, we could will these things with all our might, but the needed power wasn't there. Our human resources, as marshaled by the will, were not sufficient. They failed utterly. So it says lack of power, that was our dilemma. We had to find a power by which we could live, and it had to be a power greater than ourselves, obviously. But where and how were we to find this power? Well, that's exactly what this book is about. Its main object is to enable you to find a power greater than yourself, which will solve your problem. It leaves it as a singular problem, but it really solves all your problems. And so it will go on to and clarify. They're going to talk about spiritual, or maybe even some religious things, that spiritual as well as moral. So enable me to access a power which will solve my problem. my understanding from 45 on, it's not even about drinking anymore. It's about how do I access that power, which will solve my problem. So I would then, if they're willing to believe in a power greater than themselves, then they've done step two. And I would move, and I would probably move right to right after the third pertinent idea is where I would go. And one of the things I'd like to say before I go there is page 24 talks about the fact is that most alcoholics, for reasons yet obscure, have lost the power of choice in drink. Our so-called willpower becomes practically non-existent. We are unable at certain times to bring into our consciousness with sufficient force the memory and suffering of and humiliation of even a week ago or a month ago. Sorry. We are without defense against the first drink. So I've lost the power of choice. 24. I hear people in meetings talking about, oh, my drug of choice, my, or whatever. No, it's my drug of no choice. I don't get to choose anymore. I've lost that power of choice. And then it says further down on 24, it says, when this sort of thinking is fully established in an individual with alcoholic tendency, he has probably placed himself beyond human aid, and unless locked up, may die or go permanently insane. These are the stark and ugly facts have been confirmed by legions of alcoholics throughout history. But for the grace of God, there would have been thousands more convincing demonstrations. So many want to stop but cannot. So lost the power of choice. I'm beyond human aid. Sponsors a human. All I go by the Chris Raymer, who talked about Mark Houston sponsored it. Mark Houston was sponsored by Don Pritz. Don Pritz essentially told Mark, he says, my main goal is to get you to God as quickly as possible. And that's why I move rapidly. I used to do it slower, but if you read with people chapters once a week and all that stuff, it's going to take you 5 weeks if you can do a chapter in 1 week. I mean, once a week. So if they're still there with you 5 weeks later, move them to third step. But I won't do that anymore because it takes too long. And it's not a matter if they're going to drink again, it's when they're going to drink again. So I move rapidly through because most of the stuff they're not going to understand anyway. We can always go through it again later. But what I need to do is to get them to God as quickly as possible, whatever their understanding of God is. Now we can go back to that. I was under the delusion that I was some kind of an atheist. They asked me what an atheist was. I said it's someone doesn't believe in God, or there is no God. And then the doctor's opinion says that I'm an outright mental defective, full flight from reality. And then they say to me, when I said, well, yeah, there's no God, I'm an atheist. And they said, well, what's that? And I said, says there's no God. So they then approached me and said, well, so you admit there's a God that you don't believe in. No, that's not what I said, but yeah. And then they say to me, so Ross, for thousands of years, millions of people have believed in something greater than themselves, which they choose to call God or Allah, Buddha, Jesus Christ, whatever they want to call. And you're saying that all those people are wrong because you're right? Because you're right. Well, I hadn't thought about it that way. And it tells me on page 62 what the root of my troubles is. So then they tell me, so Ross, you get to choose your own conception of God as long as it makes sense to you, carries some kind of depth and weight. And then I would say to him, I said, well, wait a second. We just read the doctor's opinion. It says I'm an outright mental defective. And they would say to me, that's true, Ross, you are. And you're going to let me choose my own conception of God? Yeah, as long as it carries some kind of depth and weight for you, as long as it makes sense to you. Wow. And then the question would be, how free do you want to be? Entirely would be nice. Free from the bondage of self. Excuse me. So I get to page 62. Now I'll go back to 62. 62. I like to do it in first person, but it says selfishness, self-centeredness. That, I think, is the root of my troubles. Driven by 100 forms of fear, self-delusion, self-seeking, and self-pity, I step on the toes of my fellows and they retaliate. Sometimes they hurt me, seemingly without provocation. But I invariably find that at some time in the past, I had made decisions based on self, which later placed me in a position to be hurt. Wow. So I find out what my problem is. Twofold: mental obsession, this idea that overpowers all other ideas. When I start thinking about drinking, all bets are off. And if the best you have for me is call me before you drink, not unless you're buying. Okay. So when I start thinking about drinking, all bets are off. It's this mental obsession that overpowers all other thoughts. And the most insane thing I would do stone cold sober. And that's to pick up a drink after not having even drank for 3 days. After about 72 hours, alcohol's out of your body. So you're not getting loaded on craving. It's it's a mental obsession, an idea that overpowers all that it is. So that's an insane thought. But when I start drinking, I get this phenomenal craving where I have to have more. So it says that after 62, right there, right after that paragraph, it says, so our troubles, we think, are basically of our own making. They arise out of ourselves, and the alcoholic is an extreme example of self-will run riot, though he usually doesn't think so. Above everything, wow, wait a second, above everything, we alcoholics must be rid of this selfishness. We must, or it kills us. God makes that possible. And there often seems no way of entirely getting rid of self without his aid. Excuse me. Many of us had moral and philosophical convictions galore, but we could not live up to them, even though we would have liked to. Neither could we reduce our self-centeredness much by wishing or trying on our own power. We had to have God's help. So back to self can't overcome self. I have to have a power greater than myself that I can believe in that will solve my problem, enable me to access that power. So it says, when I revert back to when I would take them to 60 after the third pertinent idea that God could and would if he were sought, I would talk to them about being convinced we were at step 3, which is that we decided to turn our will and our life over to the care of God as we understood him. Just what do we mean by this, and just what do we do? My understanding is my will is my thoughts. If I was to go to a lawyer to write out a will, it'd be my thoughts on that day, who would get my earthly possessions. And my life is my actions. So I have them write thought and actions over to the care of God as I understand God. So I have them write that so they can understand more of what I'm turning over to God. My understanding is we're the only creatures on earth that have self-will. My understanding is God only wants one thing from us, is for us to turn our will over to God. And then later, when we get to around step 11, he'll give our will back to us, because by that time we'll have come to a place where it will be the correct use of will. So God will give you your will back to you to work to help others. Page 77 talks about, um, excuse me, what our real purpose is. And our real purpose is third line down, second word in. It says, our real purpose is to fit ourselves to be of maximum service to God and the people about us. So how do I get to a place where I can serve God, or how I can fit myself to be a maximum service to God and the people about me? Wow. Well, I can't do it as a selfish, self-centered, self-seeking, frightened, inconsiderate human being. So from 62, I would go down, and it talks about we had a new director. We were their agent. He is the principal, we are his agent. He is the father, we are his children. Simple concept. Top of 63, my understanding is that first paragraph, our third step promises. When we sincerely took such a position, all sorts of remarkable things followed. We had a new employer, being all powerful. He provided what we needed if we kept close to him and performed his work well. Established on such a footing, we became less and less interested in ourselves, our little plans and designs. More and more, we became interested in seeing what we could contribute to life as we felt new power flow in, and as we enjoyed peace of mind, as we discovered we could face life successfully, as we became conscious of his presence, we began to lose the fear of today, tomorrow, and thereafter, the hereafter, and we were reborn. I would then do a third step prayer with them. And it says the word is optional, but I go straight out of the book. Mostly I'll get down on our knees and hold hands with them and do the prayer together. But I've sat at tables. I think it's really about the action that changes. So you do that third step prayer, and then at the very bottom of the page, it says, next, we launched on a course of vigorous action. And the first step which is a personal house cleaning. What I will do is I bring a pen and I bring paper. And after I've done that third step prayer, I will say, next. And then if they don't have a pen, I give them mine. And I give them some paper, and I give them instructions on how to do a fourth step. But it also says on 64, says many of us have, it says a personal house cleaning, which many of us have never attempted. Though our decision was vital and crucial step. So it's vital. If you go into a hospital, that's the first thing they do is they take your vitals. They check, to see if you're, what your heartbeat is, or, they take your vitals. So it's a vital step, and it's a crucial step, and it could have little permanent effect unless at once followed by a strenuous effort to face and be rid of the things in ourselves which have been blocking us. Our liquor was but a symptom, so we had to get down to causes and conditions. And then it gives some more directions here, but we go down to the last paragraph. It says, resentment is the number one offender. It destroys more alcoholics than anything else. From it stems all forms of spiritual dis-ease. For we had not only been mentally and physically ill, twofold nature of my disease, we had been spiritually sick. And then here comes in the spiritual malady, the third aspect. Some people say it's threefold. Joe and Charlie talk about twofold, but there is a spiritual aspect. But normal people have spiritual maladies and don't drink. So, but it says here, when the spiritual malady is overcome, we straighten out mentally and physically, twofold nature of my disease. In dealing with resentments, we set them on paper. We listed people, institutions, principles with whom we were angry. We asked ourselves why we were angry. In the most cases, we found it was our self-esteem, our pocketbooks, our ambitions, our personal relationships, including sex, which were hurt or threatened. So we were sore and we were burnt up. So then it gives us examples of how to do an inventory. The only way my understanding, the only way I can have a resentment is if you're threatening some of my basic social instincts. If I feel you're taking something away from me, or I'm not getting what I want, I will probably, I will get a resentment. So, um, I don't want a the big book shows how to do the resentments or how to do the lists. Uh, Bill doesn't use more than, I think, 8 words. All you need is bullet points, my understanding. Um, Also, what happens is what they showed us is we don't do it across, because if you go across like it is written in the book, um, you will, by the time you get to your second or third resentment, you're still thinking about whoever was on your first one. So what you do, my understanding is, I'm resentful at. What I do is I'll give people a piece of paper and put a line down the middle, or but I have them write everyone they're resentful, or any institution or whatever they're resentful at, top to bottom. Don't go, who you're mad at, who you already know who it is, because you've probably done quite a few fifth steps in every bar you were drinking at. So you write, I'm resentful at Mr. Brown, Mrs. Jones, my employer, my wife. Bill only used 4 examples. He probably had many more, but for space in the book. Then when you've gotten all those things written down, then you go to the second column. What was the cause? And as it shows here, Bill only used 4 to 5 words, no more than 8. I think he's maybe Mrs. Jones. But so you write what the cause was. And personally, I don't even, all I need is 2 columns. You do 2 columns and bring the list back to me. I'll go through the rest of the work with you. What part of your personal life does it affect? Your social instincts. And there's sheets out there, Joe and Charlie sheets, or 4-step, whatever. But that's when I will bring those sheets out, because most people, they won't understand what's affecting them. So I will go through those with them. Boom, 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 boom. And then we would look at the what parts of self were affected, or what could I have done different. So we were going to look at it from a different angle. And it's always about, excuse me, where was I dishonest, self-seeking, frightened, inconsiderate? I think that's it, right? Dishonest, self-seeking, frightened, and selfish. Excuse me. My understanding of selfish. I'm sorry, I'm all going along here. My understanding of selfish is not just dollars and cents, cash register. It's, am I self-righteous, judgmental, criticizing others? So I would, when I do a 5th step, that's how I go through it. I look at what parts of self were threatened, and then where was I? Where, what parts of, where was I selfish, dishonest, self-seeking, frightened, and dishonest with those people in those relationships? And then it talks about, excuse me, I'll attempt to wrap this up. It talks about what could I have done different? Where was I? I'm drawing a little blank. I'm really anti what was my part. I grit my teeth when I hear people in meetings going, "Oh, I went to go make amends for my part." That's not what the book tells me. The book says I stay on my side of the street. Their behavior is not to be discussed. And when you discuss at group level and you tell people you're going to go make amends for your part, then you're implying that they had something to do with it too. And that's not what the book tells me. So if I go to you or to say, oh, I want to make amends for my part, that would be implying that maybe, my part was like 35%, you were 65, kind of, we can negotiate this, right? No, that's not what I'm supposed to do. Excuse me. So fifth step, then I would do 6 and 7 after they've had an hour. Sometimes it takes a day or so to get back with the people. My understanding, the way Joe and Charlie will talk about it on 75, excuse me, no, 76, my apologies, is Joe talks about, first of all, well, it says on 6, we were, if we could answer to our satisfaction, then looked at 6. We had to emphasize willingness as being indispensable. Now we are ready to let God remove from us all things we had found, admitted were objectionable. Can he now take them, every one? If we still cling to something, not let go, we ask God to be willing. So I can't do a fifth step until I can't do a 6 until I know what what's objectionable. What have I done? Where have my life been run on self-will and selfishness, dishonesty, inconsiderate behavior? And so Joe and Charlie, what he would do is he would add a prayer, and I have it in my the white parts of it. He says, "We ask God to help us not act on our old way of thinking." Wow. Wow. Because what's objectionable is for me to be selfish, dishonest, self-seeking, frightened, and inconsiderate to other human beings. So when I find myself going back, the deal is to say, wait a second, God, you and I had a deal. You were going to help me not be. Those are objectionable to me, so you were going to help me. So it's kind of like you form a friendly God. That's what I like to have. And then on 7, it says to when we were ready, we would say something like, "My Creator, I'm now willing that you should have all of me, good and bad. I pray that you now remove from me every single defect of character which stands in the way of my usefulness to you and my fellows. Grant me the strength to go out as I go out here to do your bidding." This is the first action change. This is where you start to take your first action, and which will start to change you spiritually, because now I'm out there helping others for no motive. And then the prayer that Joe would add to that, from he would say, um, "Dear God, please help me act on my new way of thinking." So we have 2 little friendly prayers, so we can ask, we can say, "Hey God, please help me to think of others and not of myself." Um, 8 is just a list from 4, and the only thing to that step is, at the end it says, if we haven't the will to do this, we ask until it comes, which is a prayer. Whenever we ask, it's a prayer. Remember, it was agreed that we'd go to any lengths. Don't have the time to go through everything with 9. There's examples there of how we would go through them. There are several sets of prayers for every step. You can make a list of nows, people locally close that you can get to. You can make a list of laters, and you can do maybes, and of course nevers. Just one second. I'm a strong advocate of 9, where it says, excuse me, it tells us 3 things in step 9. We made direct amends to such people wherever possible, except when to do so would injure them or others. So it tells me where not to make them, how to make them directly, eyeball to eyeball, so you and I can see. So I can see if you're like, just like, oh yeah, thanks. How'd you find me? I'm not a big fan of letters, and Yeah, I mean, if they're necessary, we do them, but I like to be able to have some kind of, you need to go to them. And an amends, as I understand it, is to correct or repair. To correct or repair. I'm not a fan of apologizing. In fact, you will not hear me direct people to apologize. It says in the book, an apology may be due, and that is correct. An apology may be due after you've approached and you've talked to people, but it's more about, hey, I harmed you. How can I correct it if I can? And I want you to recognize I understand now that I was wrong. I was wrong. And how can I make it right? I hear people talking about going and making, oh, I went to somebody to make amends and they apologize. Well, yeah, sorry from a guy like me is really empty. It's really empty to say, oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, I'm sorry too. I'm sorry you even showed up. You know, I used to say it all the time in high school. In my second, I had an independent study, and I was in the library. I'd do the Dewey Dexville, but I was good with the first three numbers, 4, 6, 5, and then it's point. And the librarian come to me and says, well, Ross, after the point, you have to, it's like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. You have to put them in order. And I'd say, oh, I'm sorry. He says, don't be sorry, just be right. Don't be sorry, just be right. Big fan of 10-step promises, and then I will attempt to close this up. I know I didn't really, I mean, that's how I approach people and how here's the big promise. And everybody talks about 9-step promises, and they're good. They're fine. I mean, they're promises. They're great. But the 10-step promises, the bottom 84, and we have ceased fighting anything or anyone, even alcohol. For by this time, sanity will return. We will seldom be interested in liquor. If tempted, we recoil as if from a hot flame. We react sanely and normally, and we find that this has happened automatically. We will see that our new attitude toward liquor has been given us without any thought or effort on our part. It just comes. And that's the miracle of it. We're not fighting it, neither are we avoiding temptation. We feel as if we've been placed in a position of neutrality, safe and protected. We have not even sworn off. Instead, the problem has been removed. It does not exist for us. We're neither cocky nor are we afraid. That is our experience, and that is how we react so long as we keep in fit spiritual condition. There's always conditions to all the promises. How do I stay in fit spiritual condition? Don't confuse recovered with cured. I can never successfully drink again, but I've gotten to a place where it just recovered. That's where the book is attempting to take us to full recovery. The big book, there's a big hoopla about, oh, I'm always recovering, all that stuff. It's only listed one time in the basic text, but there's actually an asterisk where it also says recovered. So it's only 2 times in the book that we talk about about recovering. Talks to the wives about being patient with their husband when he's early on and as he's recovering. And then there's an asterisk, I think, to the family afterwards, or somewhere about women in recovery early on, and it's an asterisk at the bottom of the page. If anyone wants my address or wants to contact me, I have a full set of sheets straight out of the book on how to do 11-step meditation. It's 84 to 88. Yeah, meditation, practicing meditation and prayer is essential. And then the most important thing is back to 12. How do you and I go out and approach? And the other thing I heard from a friend of mine is he would, I give out my numbers, but it's important, I think, if you can get theirs and call them a few days later and say, hey, we met a couple days ago, just seeing how you're doing. Because most people come in and they have no self-esteem or very low, and they will convince themselves not to call or to reach out unless they're just extremely desperate. But a lot of times they'll start saying, well, he's probably busy, he's having dinner or this, whatever. So I've found that it's more useful for me to call them days later and say, hey, just checking checking to see how you're doing. We met a couple days ago, and that will help to engage or to help their self-esteem. Hopefully, I've covered it well enough. I know it was a little slow to begin. So, we okay from there? Thank you.